Dark chocolate.
Well, dark chocolate is technically, in my view, it's a health food. The dark cacao bean, balanced with a nice glass of red wine for the resveratrol, which is also health properties. So I'm thinking that's a perfectly balanced diet, which is lucky because that is my diet. We should have been having this interview here where we could have been making chocolates and eating chocolate.
Now you're talking.
We need to do this again.
That's Nikki. I'm just booking my ticket for. Where are you? You're just out of New Plymouth somewhere. Where are you actually based?
Yeah, about 40 minutes away from the airport.
Handy.
And by coincidence, there's a place to stay right next door to my lab.
Oh, now you're selling it.
And how's business going? Sales, you could come across the Taiampi Road.
There you go. and how is business?
Business is booming. It's fun. It's all about the fun for me. I don't care if I didn't make a cent out of this business. The accountant probably would, but I don't. I'm doing it for the kids, for the smiles, for the quality control days, my favourite, and the experimenting days with the new flavours.
Kapai, that is awesome. Nikki, we're out of time. Thank you so much for yours. Stephen Jacoby and Napier, thank you for your time.
Ka kite.
And Anadina Nelson.
Thank you.
Happy Waitangi Day, everybody. It's over to Checkpoint and Lisa Owen.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere aki nei, sweating it out at Waitangi. The roll call of politicians drowned out by chants of noho, booing or rising waiata. There was potty talk on both sides too. Winston and Hone on stopping the crap and flushing shitty bills. Our reporter Jimmy Ellingham joins us from Waitangi with all the goings on and key players. COVID gate crashes at Canterbury College. We talked to the school principal with almost 40 staff off sick. They are ferociously cute, but beware wandering Dunedin sea lion pups. And plans for drivers of SUVs to fork out 3 times as much to park. Don't panic, we're talking about Paris. You can watch us live on the RNZ website.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Tēnā tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. The Prime Minister says there wasn't full respect today on the Waitangi Treaty grounds, but everyone there was united by a common purpose. Speeches by ACT's Nicole McKee and David Seymour and New Zealand First's Winston Peters, who all whakapapa ngā puhi, were often heckled and drowned out by some in the crowd. Christopher Luxon's speech didn't receive the same treatment. Mr Luxon says he came to Waitangi expecting to be challenged and to hear a range of views.
I understand there's really big differences. I think that the trick is, as you saw in a number of speakers, that actually for us to be able to go forward as a country, you actually can express your different views, but you actually have to listen to the other side and you actually have to understand where someone's coming from, and you have to be respectful doing that. At moments there wasn't full respect.
Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters was earlier booed and told to sit down. He told those present it was hysteria to say the government wanted to get rid of the treaty.
If you think separatism and division is going to take us to 2040, you're dreaming. And I'm telling you, let me tell you, sunshine, I used to go to the morale where they had a thing called tikanga and protocol and respect, and not you shouting. See what I mean? See? Get an education.
And ACT leader David Seymour's speech was drowned out by singing after Mr Seymour said he supported tino rangatiratanga for all a waiata, telling him to listen and sit down grew louder.
These debates about our identity and who we are as a nation and the rights of every single person, whether they've been here for 1,000 years or whether they've just got here.
David Seymour also criticised the people who drowned out fellow ACT MP Nicole McKee. The group behind a protest at Te Papa says it's unfair only Māori activists have been charged over December's spray paint attack on an English text Treaty of Waitangi display. Te Waka Haurua says its protest was carried out by a mixed group, but only Māori members were charged. Police say the 2 individuals being prosecuted are those accused of causing the damage. 2 others were charged for breaching bail and another 8 formally trespassed. A large fire in Canterbury, which last night threatened homes, is still burning. The fire near Kirwi is now contained, but has burnt through an area estimated at 2.5 kilometres long and 500 metres wide. Inspector Controller Dave Berry says 50 firefighters are being supported by 3 helicopters and heavy machinery. A post-mortem's been completed on the human remains found in a Porirua park on Thursday. Police say a scene examination continues and the death is being treated as unexplained. The end of the clean car discount seems to have prompted a surge in buying SUVs and utilities and a fall in electric and hybrid cars. The Motor Industry Association says there were more than 12,600 vehicle sales in January, up 1% on a year ago. Small and medium SUVs and utes made up more than half of registrations. Electric and plug-in hybrids sales dropped, accounting for just over 5% of light car registrations, compared with more than 18% last year. Most of the country can expect hot and dry weather to commemorate Waitangi Day tomorrow, with some areas reaching the mid-30s. Met Service meteorologist John Law says the public holiday will be marked with sunshine across the North Island and much of the south, with a high of 34 degrees in parts of Canterbury. And Billie Eilish has won Song of the Year for What Was I Made For at today's Grammy Awards. Women dominated the event, with Miley Cyrus winning Best Pop Solo and female indie rock group Boy Genius winning 3 awards. There was some controversy, with rapper Killer Mike arrested minutes after winning all 3 awards he was nominated for. To sport, and a double century to Rachin Ravindra has guided New Zealand to an imposing first innings total of 511 in the first cricket test against South Africa in Mount Maunganui. Ravindra made 240, the 12th highest score by a New Zealand player in test cricket. Brendan McCullum's 302 is the top score. South Africa skipper Neil Brand was the most successful of the Protea bowlers, taking 6 for 119. A short time ago, South Africa were 16 without loss. The table-topping Phoenix have suffered a major blow ahead of tomorrow's A-League men's clash against Central Coast Mariners, with Oscar Zawada ruled out for a month with a groin injury. The Polish striker has only just returned from 6 weeks out with a thigh injury. Coach Giancarlo Italiano says they'll simply have to cope.
This is not the first time something like this has happened, and he's a big player for us. But the rest of the squad will pick up the shortfall, and they've done it before and they'll do it again.
The 2026 Men's Football World Cup final will be held at the home of the NFL's New York Giants and New York Jets in New Jersey. The 48-team World Cup is being co-hosted by the US, Mexico and Canada, and will begin at Mexico City's Estadio Azteca on June the 11th, with the final on July the 19th. And Rugby World Cup winning Blackfern Kennedy Simon will again lead the Chiefs' Manawa Super Rugby Aupiki side. Koinanga Pitupita Kōrero. That's the news.
As the sun rises over Waitangi, RNZ National will be there to cover what promises to be one of the most contentious chapters of our National Day.
From tomorrow's dawn service until 11 a.m, we'll be right next to the action on the treaty grounds.
But we'll also head south to hear from Ngaitahu and stir the pot in London, where a Māori boil-up will be on the Waitangi Day menu at the prestigious Fortnum & Mason.
And you'll hear the inspiring story of a Māori kura in its quest to be hockey champions of Aotearoa.
That's Waitangi Morning from the Treaty Grounds with me, Mihingarangi Forbes.
And me, Julian Wilcox.
On RNZ National.
You're on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. For all of Te Ika Maui, the North Island, fine apart from areas of cloud morning and night in the west. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury. Also for Bulla, fine weather, warm in the east. Westland, cloudy periods, rain at times south of the glaciers. Otago and Southland, mostly fine and warm, but rain on Stewart Island at times. High cloud tomorrow with periods of rain for Southland and Clutha. Fiordland, periods of rain with some heavy falls, and Rekohu, Chatham Islands, fine, but some cloud tomorrow evening. It is 7 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic news and headlines for you at 5:20.
Kia ora rā e ho. Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The coalition came face to face with its opponents in Māoridom today in a spectacular clash of worldviews, and neither side is budging. The government was welcomed to the treaty grounds with a pōwhiri, but the welcome came with a warning: don't touch Te Tiriti or Waitangi. Boos and jeers were aimed at Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters, who was told e noho or sit down. ACT leader David Seymour also faced fury from protesters who sang over him while he spoke on the marae. Let's get straight to Waitangi and our reporter Jimmy Ellingham. Kia ora, Jimmy, what's it been like there today?
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, unprecedented crowds turned up today, the biggest turnout they've had in years, people say. There were some protesters here, a couple of people had to be held back, but most of them were here to listen and perhaps challenge what the government speakers had to say. I spoke to a couple of those government speakers, Nicole McKee and Shane Jones, and we'll hear more from them later in the programme. They were among a couple of sides. There was plenty of passion on both sides of the pai today, and they were on one side of it, and on the other there was plenty of passion from the hosts here at the treaty grounds as well. But for a full wrap of today, here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
From the outset, the message was unmistakable. A cry, a rumble, an almighty roar from the treaty grounds. It was a meeting months in the making, and thousands turned out for it. Conches blaring, the haka confronting. The crowd joined the challenge, jeering and shouting as the coalition made its Waitangi debut.
If we expend the same time, energy and resource into honouring the treaty, then the discussions about tinkering and tampering with principles will be put aside.
The challenge continued on the atia as speaker after speaker rose with a challenge. Toitu Te Tiriti, honour the treaty. Veteran activists Hone Harawera and Annette Sykes did not mince their words.
You want to gut the treaty in front of all of these people? Hell no!
And we should have been talked to before you allowed the tail to wag the dog.
The coalition has been dubbed the three-headed taniwha, but one of the heads bore the brunt of opposition. David Seymour repeatedly called out for his bid to rewrite the treaty principles and codify them in law.
You are putting forward a rewrite of Te Tiriti or Waitangi. You do it behind closed doors, thank goodness. Who is the hero that leaked the document to the motu?
You and your shitty-ass bill are going down the toilet. That shitty-ass bill is going down the toilet.
The ACT leader responded in kind, not shying from the confrontation, but doubling down.
We need to start talking about ideas and stop attacking people. It's got to be a debate based on respect.
And he hit back at comments made by opposition parties over the weekend.
But I can say to Pena Henare, Māori should know better than anyone. You cannot kill ideas with a gun.
The crowd soon lost patience with the regulations minister, drowning him out with waiata.
You know, social service.
It was a rough reception for Winston Peters too, as the Deputy Prime Minister met fire with fire, heckling protesters in return.
You tell me whoever said we're getting rid of the Treaty of Waitangi. So stop the crap. Stop the nonsense. Stop the hysteria. Some of us were out there before you were born fighting for Maori land rights.
The New Zealand First Leader was drowned out by protesters too, this time chanting e noho, sit down.
Get an education.
But he did not sit down. He left, departing for what he called important meetings, not sticking around for the main event, the Prime Minister's address.
I want Pao Māori to thrive, because when Māori do well, as we all know, New Zealand does well too.
In contrast to his coalition partners, Christopher Luxon delivered a measured speech with a focus on togetherness, mirroring the calls for kotahitanga. And while the crowd thinned out, so too did the jeers, the audience mostly quiet.
So we will keep talking, sometimes boisterously, always sincerely, I hope respectfully, and I believe ultimately productively.
Boisterous it was indeed today, but not violent as some had feared. Most of the politicians are expected to stay for tomorrow's dawn service, where politics are typically set aside. This year's commemorations, though, have been far from typical.
And that was Deputy Political Editor Craig McCulloch. Now let's bring Jimmy Ellingham back in from Waitangi. Jimmy, you have been speaking to some government ministers?
Yes, I spoke to Shane Jones from New Zealand First about the reception that they got and began by asking him about the strong words that Winston Peters had for the crowd today.
Oh, I think it was a response to the nature of the delivery from Hone and Annette. And rest assured, Winston's been coming here since like the late 1960s, earlier actually. So he is of Ngāpuhi, and he's very staunch in guarding his own connections with Waitangi, and not too different from me, resent any suggestion that we've done things to dishonour the treaty.
Has that suggestion been made to you today?
Oh, all the time. They say, oh, matua Shane Jones, you just aren't being straight with the teachings of your mātuas, and you're not standing with us. And sadly, as a politician, you have to wear all those criticisms.
There was some strong language used today, though, and there was some talk that Ngāpuhi was speaking a different language to the government. What's your response to that?
Oh, well, Ngāpuhi elders have always had a very deep reverence for the treaty. What I said was that the name of the treaty is the Treaty of Waitangi, not the Treaty of Waikato. And there is a distinctive attachment that the Ngāpuhi have to the treaty. Not very many of us know much about the principles of the treaty, but our tupuna, Sir James Henare, and our elder Maturata, they regarded the treaty as bilingual, indivisible, and a covenant. So naturally, the Ngāpuhi people will have a different view than what politicians from time to time have. But look, it needs to be said that there's nothing on our agenda that alters, changes, or disfigures the articles, the upoko, the words of the treaty. What we're addressing is the future of the Waitangi Tribunal, and also where the principles are referred to in law, are we confident that we know why they're there and what exactly they mean? Now, I only say that because I'm very nervous about the principles being used for a purpose beyond effecting goodwill and amity and development for Māori. They're often used, as they were in Taranaki, as a basis for overwhelming economics and science over coastal seabed mining.
We remember your opposition to that, but what is the best way to have a debate about that? Because many people are worried that this will turn to a racially divisive debate, the track we're going down at the moment.
Oh, I think that there's adequate and ample scope for a mature discussion. It's a bit like the Bible, there's a season for all things. We shouldn't race it. But I do feel that, there's room to pause and reflect that our words are directed towards creating something bigger and better and more forward-moving come 2040. And if I could say something about the kōrero today, too many of the speakers are still stuck in the 1960s, 70s and 80s.
But your leader was referencing that as well.
But he's reminding us that as each day goes by, as also Mr. Seymour said, our population is changing. We've got thousands and thousands of immigrants coming to New Zealand. So if you're looking for what are threats to the foundation influences of New Zealand and the role of the treaty, take account of the changing demography of the country. That's what Mr. Winston Peters was saying. You won't deal with that merely invoking 1835 or indeed 1840.
Shane Jones there. And Jimmy, what's happening where you are now?
Well, it's a beautiful evening here at the treaty grounds. The politicians have had their say today and cleared off, and there's preparations underway for tomorrow. You can also probably hear behind me, that's the Navy band. They're welcoming the Governor-General Dame Cindy Kero onto the treaty grounds.
Thank you, Jimmy. That is Jimmy Ellingham live from Waitangi, and we'll return to Jimmy a little later in the programme. 17 minutes after 5, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A leak in the Wellington suburb of Miramar has been spurting good drinking water into a drain at the rate of 1 litre per second for almost a month. Wellingtonians are getting increasingly frustrated watching thousands of litres of water be wasted under threats of further water restrictions this summer. The Miramar leak has been logged by Wellington Water as a medium priority job, and locals are devastated nothing's been done about it. Jemima Houston reports.
What does this sound like to you? A babbling brook? A water fountain in someone's garden? No, that's the sound of a large leak gushing out of a stone wall in Miramar's Manuka Street in Wellington. Catherine Nota is a resident who has been using buckets to measure how much water is being lost and to water her garden.
1 litre a second, that's what it was coming out at. So that's 60 litres in a minute times 16 minutes in a day times 24 hours, 86,400 litres.
Catherine says the leak is running 24/7 and only stopped during an outage when Wellington Water worked on a street nearby.
So it was from the water supply, it's not just anything else. So it's good, clear drinking water, I believe.
The leak sprung up on the 13th of January. Then it was pouring out at a slower rate of 1 litre every 4 seconds. A resident who didn't want to be named reported it to Wellington City Council that day.
And then I followed up on that Monday the 15th and then again at the end of the week on the Friday, because they said they were going to send someone out to have a look at it, and they never did.
The Wellington Water website confirms Manuka Street is a drinking water job. It's logged as medium priority, meaning 4 to 10 litres of water per minute is being lost, but there is no risk to public safety, loss of pressure or risk to property. Motorists using Menorgan Road in Strathmore Park have been driving through large puddles caused by leaks for years, according to locals. The water service provider has multiple high priority jobs logged on the road, meaning there is a high flow of water, a risk to safety and a noticeable loss of water pressure. A mum at a park nearby says walking her kids through puddles on the footpath is normal.
Most of the time we would see a leak, it would get repaired and then 2 weeks later it would come up somewhere else. If you look at how many patches are on that road.
Jessica Hutchings has a home in Y Street in Island Bay, where water has been leaking out of a fire hydrant and a water toby for over a year. She says it has brought water into the house and has changed the water pressure.
Definitely not as high pressure in the house. Absolutely. We've had plumbers in to confirm that, trying to work out what we can do to get more pressure through the pipes.
Jessica says the community on Y Street have got together to report the leak, but have been told it's not a priority, despite it being logged as a high priority job.
It's distressing because you come out onto the street and you hear the sound of running water, and water's a taonga and it's just being wasted. So we need to fix it.
Wellington Water says some leaks can cause a noticeable loss of water pressure. The provider has purposefully reduced pressure as part of a pilot project in the suburbs Brooklyn, Melrose and Johnsonville in an attempt to save water. The pilot started in January this year, and if it's found to be successful, pressure reduction will be implemented permanently in these areas.
It is 5:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Let us know your thoughts on how things are going in Waitangi. Enough respect shown for visitors or not? Let us know why. 2101 on text, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for us to go to the headlines now. Evie standing by, ko Evie anō tēnei.
New Zealand First Deputy Leader Shane Jones says that he is constantly being told by Ngā Puhi that his party has done things to dishonour the Treaty of Waitangi. Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters was confronted while speaking at the treaty grounds today. Shane Jones told Checkpoint that Ngā Puhi elders have a deep reverence for and attachment to the treaty. He says there is ample scope for mature discussion around the treaty, although too many people appear to be stuck in the past with their thinking. And ACT leader David Seymour says his Waitangi speech was interrupted by a small minority who doesn't represent all of Māoridom. His speech was drowned out by a waiata telling him to listen and sit down. The man accused of murdering Dunedin man Gurjit Singh has been remanded in custody without entering a plea. The 27-year-old's body was found at his home last Monday, with forensic evidence indicating he died from multiple stab wounds by a sharp weapon. Electric and plug-in hybrid sales dropped in January, accounting for just over 5% of light car registrations, compared with more than 18% last year. Small and medium SUVs and utes made up more than half of the 12,600 vehicle registrations. And Fire and Emergency says good progress is being made on extinguishing a large fire near Kirwi in Canterbury, but they're likely to remain on site overnight. The fire is now contained. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, State Highway 25 at Thames and the Coromandel has reopened just before 5 p.m. this evening after a serious crash earlier this afternoon. Our next traffic news and headlines are at 20 to 6.
Ngā mihi e ho. The Black Caps are in firm control of the first cricket test against South Africa. New Zealand has racked up a mammoth 511 first innings total in Mount Maunganui, with Rachin Ravindra scoring his maiden test double century in the process. Joining me now is sports reporter Jonty Dine. Okay, so pretty productive day for the Black Caps, yeah?
Yeah, well, it's another great day with the bat, particularly for Ravindra. He's proving that he's just as prolific in the red ball game. Of course, him and Kane Williamson, they were both unbeaten overnight with centuries, but Williamson didn't last too long today, and it was a very un-Kane-like dismissal. He had a hoik at one and just mistimed it. And wickets did fall reasonably regularly throughout the afternoon, but most were able to contribute something with Ravindra, who just kept humming along. He did have a slight nervous period in the 190s, though. He lost two of his teammates at the other end, and it took more than 10 overs for him to get from 191 to 200. So you can definitely see a bit of relief in his face once he got there. He was eventually out for 240, and the New Zealand tail was mopped up pretty quickly. And a short time ago, South Africa were 26 for 2, still 485 runs behind, so plenty of work to do for the Proteas.
Let's talk about the Super Bowl. It's just a week away, roundabouts, and some pretty strange bets being made. What?
There are, yes. So, of course, Super Bowl, the biggest gambling day in the US, and the bets are already coming in, but they are not just on the result, but also whether or not Taylor Swift and Kansas Chief Travis Kelce will get engaged after the game.
Yeah.
Other bets, Lisa, are how many times Swift will be shown on camera, if her and Kelce will be shown kissing, and if the MVP will mention her in their speech. So the world's been weirdly obsessed with this relationship and Swift being at the NFL ever since this relationship began. She's reportedly attracted 2 million new viewers to Chiefs games, but it's also sparked some pretty nasty vitriol and some wild conspiracies, such as she's a plant to help Joe Biden win the next election somehow. So, and the ridiculous thing is she might not even make it to the Super Bowl because she's got a concert in Japan and she needs to arrange parking for a private jet in Las Vegas in order to get to the game. Now, the New York Times did crunch the numbers and they found that she's actually only on TV for about 25 seconds each game. So out of 3.5 hours, it's not a lot of screen time. And the team have no issues with her. Chief Safety Justin Reed, he told TMZ that she's very sweet and she's complimented everyone she's talked to. And of course, the man in the middle of all of this, Travis Kelce, he, speaking to US media, here's what he had to say about the situation.
It's exciting for me, but it was all brand new. From having the paparazzi follow me every single day into work to, just everybody having my name on their talk show every single day, whether it's sports, whether it's not sports. It's just been a crazy ride I could have never anticipated, man. But I'm having fun with it. We're just we're two people in a relationship supporting each other and having fun with it, man. It's nothing more than that. She's dealt with it forever, and we hear it, but we hardly ever talk about it. It's nothing to even talk about.
Exactly. I mean, as you said, it's just two famous people in a relationship. It's nothing new in terms of athletes and musicians. We've had Shakira and Gerard Piqué, Nicole Scherzinger, Lewis Hamilton, Anna Kournikova, Enrique Iglesias, and of course the OG athlete-musician couple, David and Victoria Beckham. But for some reason, this relationship is sparking a lot of hate. Not sure why this is causing so much controversy, Lisa, but I think the lads just need to shake it off.
Yeah, they should mind their business, those people. Thank you, Jonty. Jonty Dine there with Sports News. Returning to Waitangi now, there were attempts to drown out ACT leader David Seymour with waiata as he spoke on the marae. The crowd quietened down after a Ngāpuhi leader intervened. The same thing happened to his MP and Minister Nicole McKee, who was heckled as she gave her speech in Te Reo Māori. Still, David Seymour's pretty happy with how things went.
Look, overwhelmingly a success. You've got to put this in context. New Zealand's a country celebrating 184 years of history with some big challenges to overcome. They were discussed, and besides a relatively small number of people who weren't even the host, not actually from here, disrupting some speeches and some pretty unfortunate things one or two speakers said, it was actually a good discussion about our country's future.
Hone Harawira is from the north, and he spoke very directly to you, and I'm using his words here. He said, your shitty house bill is going down the toilet. Your response?
Well, you got to remember, Hone had a chance to be in Parliament, and that's all gone now, and I think the people probably got it right when they voted for someone else. He also said to me afterwards on camera, which he didn't realise, that between you and me, I really like your charter schools. So I think there's a mix of views, and I wouldn't take too seriously Hone's rhetoric or his political prognostications. He tends to get the politics wrong, and his rhetoric's belied by his true positions.
Is he right, though, that bill is, well, it's in essence a waste of time, can't go anywhere, the end?
Well, you know, there's a poll recently published in the Herald that said it's 60% agree with it and 18% oppose it. To me, that sounds like a political idea that's got a wee way to go yet.
But National says it won't support it beyond the Select Committee. New Zealand First says it's not supporting it either. It is, costs money to do, and you're about saving money as well. And some people would say it's divisive when it will go no further.
Well, first of all, it's at least 9 months away before the second vote, so I'd put more emphasis on where the public are at then and how they decide to vote at the time than what they say now. And secondly, if you're seriously saying that it's not worth spending any money on having a select committee inquiry into what something means, in this case the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, the most important constitutional concept we have, then I've got good news for you, because we're not actually going to spend any money on it. The select committee would be sitting anyway.
Do you think that you can change National's point of view? You can change Christopher Luxon's point of view? Because that's basically what you're intimating. You would need his support. So can you change his mind?
Well, I can certainly count, and so can he. And I think one thing that he counts on is where the public are at. And as I say, this is actually a popular idea, that we should finally be able to have a public discussion about what the treaty means, rather than sending it off to the courts and the Waitangi Tribunal and the public service, everybody but everyday New Zealanders.
You have expressed concern about one set of rights for everybody, right? So I'm wondering, what rights or entitlements are Māori getting at the moment that you do not think they're entitled to?
Well, where would you like to start? I mean, if you look at the previous government's three waters representation boards, they had positions reserved that you could not be on if you were not a Māori representative. There was a separate healthcare authority. These things have been got rid of, by the way. But there's still a Human Rights Commission that has a separate CEO reserved for a Māori person. Now, again, that is just totally unacceptable in a free and democratic society. And yet it's a model that, under the current treaty principles, is actually the logical conclusion you would draw, that the treaty is a partnership and each treaty partner must be represented in each institution. Then you get to consultation on resource management issues. It's basically pervading every part of life, that so long as the treaty is seen as a partnership between races, as some people have described it, then your status in everyday public life in New Zealand is going to depend on who your ancestors were. And I challenge people to tell me where in the world has that worked before, because there's lots of places where it hasn't.
The counter to that, as you would be aware, is people saying that you are willfully ignoring the effects of colonialism.
Well, who does it affect? I mean, there's many people in New Zealand. For example, one of our MPs, Karen Shua, her husband is a Cambodian refugee. I myself am 1/4 Scottish. So you're right, there's lots of things that have happened in history that badly affect people. But at the same time, there are many Māori doing quite nicely, thank you very much, who don't need to be categorised as disadvantaged or victims of colonisation. Meanwhile, there are many disadvantaged people who are not Māori who also need help. So why don't we just skip a bit and help the people who need help rather than dividing people by race?
And that was ACT leader David Seymour. A quick bit of your feedback now on Waitangi. This person says the National Party and the hangers-on got all they deserved. Well done. And it's signed off from a Pākehā man. This listener says, Waitangi shambles, so disrespectful of elected representatives. Another says, Shone Jones makes a good point. Given the rapid change in our demographics, how will we keep the treaty relevant once a significant portion of voters, and therefore elected representatives, do not descend from treaty partners? 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ with your feedback. 28 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tonu mai. You are listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is, of course, time for the business news. Ko taku hoa NINA called Nona Peltier, who joins me in the studio. Okay, let's talk about Sky City and the damage to the fire damage to the convention centre, Nona.
It's still a problem for Fletcher Building. So it's not completed yet. They're hoping that they will finish it, say, August, September, and then they'll do the commissioning, which is basically the fine finishing, and hand the keys over to Sky City. But before they get to that, they're suggesting that it's going to cost another $165 million to get to that point. And that's... Well, there's still risks there. And as long as the building remains under construction, the risk continues to mount in terms of labor costs, materials costs, and steel. It's like something like 7 or 5 times the price that they originally budgeted for is what the steel work is costing now. So it's massive. $350 million spent on steel work alone. So it's been a real pit for Fletcher Building. The market heard their report today that was released ahead of their financial result, which will come up next week. That's their first half. And they're saying it's going to be included there. They wanted to have a separate discussion about it. The share price fell 7% today as a result of that disclosure.
Okay, let's talk about demand for workers continuing to fall. So what's going on in the labour market?
Yes, so we're now starting to see some of that information coming through that's going to feed into the labour market report from Statistics New Zealand on the fourth quarter. It's going to be released on Wednesday. It's going to show us where the unemployment rate is and so on. So up until that, we've got some additional information that's coming through. A new report from a company, which is rather an organization, Recruitment, Consulting and Staffing Association, so that their members are the people who find jobs for folks. They're saying that the index fell just over 30%, and that's more than double the rate of decline that's seen in Australia. And what this means is there are fewer jobs available, 58% drop in the demand for workers in tech, and a 54% drop for demand in workers in public administration. This is going to start to show through, we're thinking, on Wednesday when we see those labour market numbers come through. If unemployment rises, it's probably going to have risen. That will be a positive for the Reserve Bank's take on inflation and perhaps interest rates. So we'll see what happens. Closer to home, there was really strong labor data out of the United States, which kind of dashed hopes that there'll be an interest rate cut there sooner than later.
What about our market numbers, Nona?
Well, despite the Fletcher drop, our share price only fell 4 points, nearly 4 points, to 11,929. The New Zealand dollar is sticking around 60.7 US cents. So it's kind of holding on despite the strength of the US dollar at 93.3 Australian and 48.1 British pence.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite and Nona Peltier there with Business News. Fire crews in Canterbury will be working throughout the night to monitor and extinguish a huge blaze that's burnt through 80 hectares of forest and scrub in Kirwi. The fire, which broke out near the Waimakariri River late last night, is contained and controlled with no loss of buildings or livestock. Some residents were evacuated as precaution, but they have been given the all clear to return home. Anna Sargent reports.
Derek Anson had to leave his home on Old West Coast Road abruptly last night as a fire raging through trees nearby was spreading quickly.
I was woken by a neighbour at about 11:30, told to pack a bag and get out, which I basically did.
He says the air was thick with the smell of smoke. Derek and another evacuee, Ross Smith, spent a sleepless night at the evacuation centre in the Kirwi Community Hall.
I sat under that tree over there, watching the smoke over there,
Yeah.
watching it flare up, watch the sky, the silhouette on the sky.
See it just in the smoke and just watch all the flare-ups. And, yeah. That's getting a bit close to home.
The fire broke out about 10 last night and in its height covered 80 hectares of land. 10 properties on Old West Coast Road were evacuated as a precaution, while several other households self-evacuated. Fire and Emergency Incident Controller Dave Berry says several helicopters as well as around 50 firefighters remain on scene.
We're just going around trying to contain the line and make sure that it doesn't break out or spread. There will be a crews overnight monitoring the situation, and there will be quite a few more start tomorrow morning again.
Dave Berry says the fire is very deep-seated in places, so it will take some time to fully put it out. FENZ met with Kerwi residents this morning, where the evacuees were given the all-clear to return home. One of the residents, Leola, says after repeated fires in the area and with further hot temperatures forecast, she wants to know how to be prepared.
I don't think it was ever going to make our houses, but we've had 3 fires in a month, so I think it's time to talk to people about it. I just think our fire brigades are doing an amazing job.
A total fire ban is in place for Canterbury, while the fire risk remains high throughout the region. Dave Berry urges people to take great care with any activities that could cause any sparks.
Just be sensible and don't do anything that's likely to cause fires, i.e. mowing lawns that is going to sparks or anything like that. And just be very, very careful out there.
Met Service meteorologist Claire O'Connor says warm weather will continue in Canterbury and Marlborough until later this week. Hotspots tomorrow include Christchurch, which has a high of 32 degrees, and Blenheim with a high of 34 degrees.
In breaking news, Taylor Swift has become the first person to win the Grammy for Album of the Year 4 times. In accepting the award, she said, "All I want to do is keep doing this." She's also announced a new album out in April. It is 21 minutes away from 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let's get to some of your feedback now, a lot of it coming in around our commemorations. Michael has got in touch and says, when will David Seymour get that it is not about race, it is about culture, ways of seeing and being in the world? Nell has got in touch to say, scrap the treaty, it has no place in our modern multicultural democratic society. And this listener says, when the Prime Minister says there wasn't a total display of respect today, I really hope he's referring to the disrespect that was displayed firstly by politicians. For instance, David Seymour stood and said tino rangatiratanga should be for everyone. This disrespects those ancestors that committed to the kindness of allowing British subjects to arrive. It disrespects any knowledge below the surface of te tiriti. And this one too, from Maddie, who says, thanks for asking about what rights Māori get. This is where the debate lies and which needs ongoing interrogation. Do keep your feedback coming about anything you've heard on the program this evening. You can text us 2101, you can tweet us at checkpointrnz, and the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Anea Evi, mena pitapita kōrero.
ACT leader David Seymour says he believes the discussions today at Waitangi were a success because they prompted debate about the future of the treaty. Mr Seymour's speech was heckled by the crowd, with some calling on him to sit down. He told Checkpoint only a small minority booed his speech. Mr Seymour says he believes the bill to review the treaty would get support from the public. The man accused of murdering Dunedin man Gurjit Singh has been granted interim name suppression. He didn't enter a plea when he appeared in court earlier today and was remanded in custody. The private medical lab company at the centre of a long-running pay dispute with staff says it's waiting for guidance from the Employment Relations Authority. SCL Awanui Labs workers in the South Island, Wellington and Hawke's Bay are currently on a 24-hour strike. An Awanui spokesperson says urgent services have been maintained during the strike to ensure seriously ill patients can receive critical tests. Fire trucks from 5 stations in the Auckland area were sent to extinguish an electric scooter which caught fire in Mount Albert early this afternoon. There were no reports of injuries in the fire, which happened just after 1 p.m. And much of the east coast of the South Island has been sweltering today, with temperatures reaching more than 35 degrees in the Hurunui district in North Canterbury. Met Service forecaster Tuporo Masters says temperatures will be above 30 tomorrow. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, State Highway 94 in the South Island. A reminder that the Homer Tunnel between Te Anau and Milford will be closed overnight and almost every night this week, including Saturday the 10th of February, closing at 8 p.m. for works each night. There is no detour available. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Ngā mihi, Evie. COVID's closed a Canterbury school today with almost 40 staff down with the virus. Rangiora High School told parents yesterday that it didn't have enough staff to cover classes just 2 days into the new year. It turns out a teacher-only day may have actually been a super spreader event. Well, joining us now is Rangiora High School Principal Bruce Kearney. Kia ora, Bruce. I bet you thought you were through this with COVID.
Yeah, kia ora, by the way. Yeah, I did. Actually, to be honest with you, I didn't even think about COVID for the start of the year. Just wasn't even on my radar.
So what did you think when the dominoes started falling?
Well, we got a couple on the Friday, and then all of a sudden the Saturday just went crazy, and it was like, oh, yeah, here we go again. We have been through this before, so it wasn't like we were, running around like headless chickens. But we'd always tried to make sure that we stayed open. That was our core philosophy all through COVID, stay open. Second day, we're closed.
Must be pretty disappointing, especially when, keen to get started, get stuck in, beginning of the year.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I've just felt more and more sad as the day progressed. There's a year nines for us, 400 year nines. It's their first go at high school. They're probably a little anxious, and then we have this. And you can't get these days back, We just have to push forward, and it's short term. We'll get through it. We have before. But it's just a little sad.
Are you sick, Bruce?
No, I'm not sick.
You've managed to dodge it.
I have seemed to have managed to dodge it, but then again, I'm not really fully involved in Teacher Only Day. I kind of stand at the back.
Yeah, so tell us about that. What makes you suspect it was that? It's more than one Teacher Only Day, is it, with some activities?
Yeah, we had 3 Teacher Only Days. So one of them was a social day. The third one was a social Teacher Only Day. Look, the only reason I think it's that is just timing. We started seeing cases late Friday and then Saturday, and if you roll back a couple of days, then you're sitting on Wednesday, which was a teacher-only day. I'm only just guessing.
Yeah. What about kids? Because they were in class on the Friday, weren't they? That was actually your first day back?
Yeah, so we had year nines on Thursday, and then we had the full school on Friday. And I have no doubts that we'll have some cases, but we won't find that out till Wednesday. We would have found that out today if we'd been open, but... until they start phoning in and calling in sick, we won't find out what's going on, really.
So what does this mean for you guys in terms of, are you going to do anything differently? Because a lot of people, they thought we're having a break from COVID,
Yeah, look, we're going to focus first and foremost on getting kids back into classrooms. That's what we're going to do, just getting their teaching and learning. We do have a whole bunch of things like school productions and whānau, but my personal opinion is you got to get on with it. You got to hit business as usual as quickly as possible. So we may be gentle this week, but then, as far as I'm concerned, we're into it next week.
Are you hearing anything from other schools about whether they've got cases?
No, just everybody's just texting and emailing me saying sorry, and they're just really pleased it's not them. But no.
So Wednesday is when you're planning to fire back up again. Do you reckon you're going to have enough teachers?
We're going to do it. Yeah. So by the time we get to Wednesday, those who are away on Friday, possibly Saturday, will be starting to come right, and we'll just get back into it. It may mean that our teachers have to cover additional classes. It may mean that some of our teachers want to wear masks, or kids, students. That's all good. We'll go about it in a kind way.
Bruce, I'm wondering how you're handling it, because there's no mandatory stay-at-home period anymore, right? So are you asking your teachers only to return after they test negative, or what's school's policy?
No. So everything remains as it was. If you're sick, you stay at home. When you feel better, you come back to school. Our teachers have chosen to test. There is no mandatory testing at all.
No, so you as a school policy do not require a negative test for them to come back?
No.
When they feel okay, you're happy to have them in the class?
100%, yep, we are.
Really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. That is Bruce Kearney from Rangiora High School. They're out of class today because a lot of the teachers have COVID. Hope to be back on Wednesday. A major manhunt is underway in the UK for a man suspected of throwing a chemical substance on a mother and her 2 daughters. Police are hunting 35-year-old Abdul Azadi, who has been on the run since the attack in Clapham last Wednesday. They have released new CCTV pictures of him shortly after and are now offering a reward of £20,000 for information that could lead to his arrest. The BBC's Simon Jones has the latest.
Where is Abdul Shakur Izedi? On the 4th day of their manhunt, police have released CCTV images of him at a Tesco in North London. He has serious injuries to his face. This is just over an hour after a mother and her 2 children were attacked. That took place at 7:25 on Wednesday evening in Lessar Avenue in Clapham. Police say Mr Azedi then took the tube to King's Cross Underground Station, where he was seen just before 8 o'clock. He was next caught on camera at the Tesco in Caledonian Road at 8:42. He went into King's Cross Underground Station again at precisely 9 p.m. And officers have now revealed the last confirmed sighting was just after 9:30 when he comes out of Tower Hill Tube Station opposite the Tower of London. The Metropolitan Police is offering a reward of up to £20,000 for information leading to the arrest of Abdul Shakur Izedi. Officers believe there are people who know where he is who have yet to come forward, and they're warning that anyone assisting him to evade capture will face arrest.
Hello to police, is anyone home?
5 properties have been searched. 2 empty containers with warnings on the labels were found. Tests are ongoing to see if they held the substance used in the Clapham attack. That liquid was found to be a very concentrated corrosive substance. Mr Azedi is originally from Afghanistan. Members of the Afghan community in London have made this plea.
Our appeal to Abdul Azadi is for him to hand himself into the police as soon as possible. It was a horrific crime on the streets of London against a woman and 2 girls. And we hope that the public will also cooperate with the police.
The woman injured in the attack remains in a critical but stable condition in hospital.
It is 12 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let's have some more of your feedback now. A number of you getting in touch about Wellington's ongoing water woes. Mike says maintaining Wellington's water infrastructure to a satisfactory standard is clearly beyond the ability of Wellington Water and its contractor. Isn't it time for the Wellington Council, the Greater Wellington Council, the central government or someone, he says in capital letters, to intervene? And a few of you have got in touch about another leak. There is another major leak at the airport, end of Cootes Avenue, Kilburney. I have reported it multiple times over the past 3 months. And today it was still leaking. It's pouring out of a fire hydrant in the road. Someone else says they reported it a leak next to the airport, so I suspect it's the same one. And it's been there since December, yet not fixed at this stage. Do get in touch with your feedback. Text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We'll have more on Wellington's water woes after 6 tonight. Now, beware wandering sea lion pups who are emerging from their hidey holes around Dunedin this breeding season. Many of the pups are now 4 to 6 weeks old and their mums are shuffling them off to the beaches to hone their swimming skills. Up until now, many of them have been tucked away, avoiding humans and dogs. But Doc says in recent days, a pair of newborns have been playing on the road together. Biodiversity Ranger Jim Fife has just been out tracking and tagging some of the pups when we caught up with him.
They're starting to come out of the woodwork and we're trying to catch up with them and tag them. So, to keep tabs on how many we have been born around the Dunedin coastline.
And how difficult is that, Jim?
The tagging itself or
tracking them down as well.
Tracking them down. So, the mothers are pretty canny at hiding away, though hiding away from them means hiding away from the male sea lions. So, they might be in people's backyards, and often we hear about sea lions because they are in public places. It's at this time of year that the ones that have managed to hide away, in more remote places or, just hidden even in people's neighbourhoods, come out of the woodwork and suddenly we hang on, this is a new one.
So how is breeding season going? How many pups have you found?
So far, we've found 22. We were always saying we were expecting sort of upwards of 25 this year. We've got about 34 breeding-aged sea lions that we know of, but some of them will skip a year, or some of the younger ones won't have their first pup until they're a little bit older. We've beaten our record from last year of 21, but we're still expecting to see a few more yet.
Now, tell me about these little fellows. When they start wandering, about how old are they and how far can they go?
Yeah, so they can be 4 to 6 weeks old, and mum starts to bring them down to the sea, introduce them to the water, which, you'd think they'd be naturals, but, they take a bit of coaxing to get in that cold water, and then they start doing this sort of dog paddle that looks particularly unnatural for a pinniped, but they pick it up pretty quickly. But they are still 15 to maybe 25 kg at that age, and so still lightweights in the seal world, and we need to take a little bit of care around them and get dogs under control and not crowd them out too much.
Yeah, tell me a bit about that, because this is when they can come in contact really with humans, can't they? Because they're crossing people's property and doing other things that you kind of maybe don't think seals do.
Yeah, that's right. We've got 10 pups that have been born between Ocean View and Smales Beach, so that is pretty much suburban Dunedin. So they're facing dogs and people and surfers and just picnickers. They're quite curious and can be interactive, but it really isn't in their interest to crowd them out. Or we need them to be little sea lions and not try to make them into pets or. Yeah, so it's getting that message out there to just give them space and keep your dogs on leads when you're going through the dunes or in forest around the coastline, because you just don't know when you're going to be coming across them.
Do the mums leave them while they go off and search for food, or what happens?
Yes, that's right. So the mothers stay with the pups for about a week after they've been born, but then they're foraging on a daily basis and leaving the pups hidden away in the bushes. And the pups will potentially come out and wander while they're away as well. So, they are really vulnerable at that stage. But the mum will attend, once a day or so to give the pup a good feed. Then they might actually go to another beach and rest it up away from the pup for a while, have a bit of me time. It's an interesting time. We're learning so much about sea lion behaviour. They've been down in the southern Arctics, but with them coming and being here 24/7 on a coastline where people are also regularly attending, we learn so much more about sea lion behaviour.
And that is Biodiversity Ranger Jim Fife from DOC. Voters in Paris have approved a plan to triple parking fees for people from outside the city if they drive SUVs. The rules will affect internal combustion and hybrid vehicles weighing over 1.6 tonnes and electric vehicles weighing more than 2 tonnes. The large vehicles, when parked on Paris's narrow streets, make it difficult or even impossible for other cars and bikes to squeeze by safely. The BBC's John Lawrenson reports.
On Paris's pretty left bank, in a narrow street called, rather wonderfully, Rue Madame or Mrs. Street, a giant white Volvo XC90 hybrid glides noiselessly into a parking space. Well, I say in, the back end is more out. Inside, a young mother and her 10-ish-year-old son. She gets out and asks me if I know where the nearest parking meter is. I say, funny you should say that, and we get talking.
Je conduis plutôt un inter pour aller chercher mon fils à l'école et déposer.
The threatened new charges will apply to fossil fuel cars over 1.6 tonnes and e-cars over 2 tonnes, so she will have to pay. She says the charge is unfair because she doesn't really have a choice.
We didn't get this car to drive in Paris, which I don't do very often. But because we have big dog, so for long journeys we can't take the plane and it's difficult to take the train. This is our way of travelling.
I mentioned this lady when on the steps of the Opera House in one of the areas where Paris traffic is densest. I meet up with Tony Ronucci, Executive Director of the anti-air pollution non-profit Respire, Breathe in English. They always have an excuse.
If people vote in favour, it'll be a very strong and powerful signal to car makers to tell them stop doing SUV. Now you have to focus on smaller and electric vehicles.
Down in the metro, which is how, says Tony Ronucci, people should get around. But Philippe Nozière, president of a non-profit called 40 Million Motorists, says this is not always possible and that this referendum is fundamentally unfair.
Comme d'habitude,
as usual, Mayor Anne Hidalgo is getting Parisians to vote. But Parisians mostly don't have cars, and when they do, won't be made to pay higher parking charges if they stay in the district where they live. It's people who live in the suburbs, who don't get to vote in this referendum, who often need their cars to get into town, and who will have to pay this tax.
Mayor Hidalgo has already drastically limited the space given to cars in this town by cutting street parking places and extending cycle and bus lanes. She's limited access to the city for older, more polluting cars, increased the price of car parking, introduced parking charges for motorised two-wheelers, and imposed a speed limit of 19 miles an hour on most roads. For people out on the streets of Paris, this proposed new measure is either, pâtisserie metaphor time, the cherry on the cake, or takes the biscuit.
I think it's fair. I have a big car. I always have things that need moving, plants, trees and so on. So I need my SUV. But if you have a big car, you have to bear the consequences.
I am in favor of letting people live their lives when it comes to things like this. Leave people in peace.
Very interesting. So that's Paris's plans to triple parking fees for people driving their SUVs from outside the city. What do you think? Should we introduce that in Auckland, for example? They're saying cars weighing over 1.6 tonnes. I need someone out there to let me know what size vehicle that is, please, could you? So triple the fees for parking if you're driving an SUV into the city. Is that a way to deal with Auckland's congestion? And what about some other cities? Tauranga's got some problems too, doesn't it, with traffic? 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ with your reckons on that one. A lot of you are getting in touch about Waitangi commemorations. This person says that David Seymour's argument that it is up to Parliament to determine the principles of the treaty is just plain wrong. There are two parties to the Treaty of Waitangi, the Crown and Māori who signed it. The Māori language version, they say. It is only those two parties that can change the treaty or determine its principles. The Crown's position is determined by Parliament, but Parliament cannot determine Māori's position on the treaty. That is a matter solely for Māori, says John from Christchurch. Others of you reckon that the commemorations have been a bit rude. Such rudeness at Waitangi. Our elected representatives quietly listened to the views of the crowd, but no such respect from the crowd, this person says.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Tēnā tātou. Ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The government came face-to-face with Māori leaders at the Waitangi Treaty Grounds today who had a simple message: don't touch Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Our political reporter Annika Smith is there.
Ministers were welcomed onto Te Whariruranga this morning with only a few minor scuffles to report. The treaty grounds heaved with people today as visitors from around the country crammed in to get a front row seat to the coalition's Waitangi debut. Veteran activist Annette Sykes told the government its lies would be exposed, while Honi Harawira said the treaty principles bill would be flushed down the toilet. Government ministers spoke and walked around without any major incidents, though David Seymour and Winston Peters' speeches were at times overpowered by waiata sung from protesters in the crowd.
ACT leader David Seymour says he believes the government's visit was overwhelmingly a success, despite the attempts to drown him out. He told Checkpoint only a small minority booed his speech.
New Zealand's a country celebrating 184 years of history with some big challenges to overcome. They were discussed, and besides a relatively small number of people who weren't even the host, not actually from here, disrupting some speeches and some pretty unfortunate things one or two speakers said, it was actually a good discussion about our country's future.
David Seymour says the public may be able to change the Prime Minister's mind on supporting the Treaty Principles Bill. New Zealand First MP Shane Jones says nobody should be surprised at the response Winston Peters gave hecklers at Waitangi. The Deputy Prime Minister told his opponents to stop the hysteria and to get an education. Shane Jones says people deserve a certain level of respect when they've done the hard yards, and those who go after Mr Peters should expect a robust, colourful and fiery response.
I think both Winston and I know people have got pent-up emotions. Whether you think they're driven by misinformation or different priorities, people are on edge.
Shane Jones says protesters were unnecessarily rude to ACT MP Nicole McKee by cutting her speech off. The man accused of murdering Dunedin man Gurjit Singh has been remanded in custody without entering a plea. The 27-year-old's body was found at his home last Monday. Forensic evidence indicated he died from multiple stab wounds by a sharp weapon. The accused, a 33-year-old technician, was granted interim name suppression after appearing in Dunedin District Court this afternoon, facing one charge of murder. He didn't apply for bail and has been remanded in custody until later this month. US senators have announced a long-sought bipartisan bill that aims to combat illegal immigration at the US-Mexico border and in return unlock funding for Ukraine in its war against Russia. It's been in negotiation for months, the BBC's Paddy Maguire reports.
It could be a breakthrough, but there's little certainty that this bill, worth nearly $120 billion, will even pass its first vote in Congress, which is expected mid-next week. Republicans have long been demanding money and measures to deal with security on the southern border before they'll consider granting White House calls for $60 billion for Kyiv. It seems like senators might have found a way forward, but hardline Republicans, including Donald Trump, who's campaigning hard on an anti-immigration ticket in November's elections, are likely to kick back.
Health New Zealand Te Whatu Ora says it's monitoring the ongoing pay dispute at a private medical lab company which holds many government contracts. A 24-hour strike by scientists and technicians employed by SCL Awanui Labs in the South Island, Wellington and Hawke's Bay will finish at midnight, their 11th full day of strike action since July. Apex Union says the pay gap with Te Whatu Ora-owned labs is now more than 46% for lab technicians and 33% for scientists. A spokesperson for Te Whatu Ora says officials recently met with providers and unions over pay equity issues. A leak in the Wellington suburb of Miramar is estimated to be losing 1 litre of water every second. There's been no action from Wellington Water since the residents on Manuka Street first reported it more than 3 weeks ago. A Miramar resident says that the leak is pouring out 3 times faster than it was last Monday.
By the time I called in, someone else had already done. And then I followed up later in the week and 9 people had reported at that point. And yeah, it's just been going ever since. So yeah, basically when I calculated out, it was losing a litre every 3.7 seconds. And now look at it, it's probably losing way more than that.
Fire and Emergency says good progress is being made on extinguishing a large fire near Kirwi in Canterbury, but they're likely to remain on site overnight. Inspector Controller Dave Berry says 50 firefighters are still on site and they're being supported by 3 helicopters and heavy machinery.
We're just going around trying to contain the line and make sure that it doesn't break out or spread. And our biggest concern, of course, this afternoon is just the wind building up and picking up. Otherwise, we're quite happy with progress.
Dave Berry says they're removing dangerous trees, extinguishing any deep-seated burning and dealing with any spot fires. The temperatures reached to just over 35 degrees in North Canterbury's Hurunui district today. Much of the east coast of the South Island has been sweltering, with more to come tomorrow. The hottest temperature was 35.4 in Hurunui at 4 p.m. Other hot spots included Culverden, also in North Canterbury, which hit 34.3 degrees, and Ashburton at 32 degrees. Dunedin also reached 31 degrees today. And in sport, New Zealand are on top late on day 2 of the first cricket test against South Africa at Mount Maunganui. The Black Caps scored an imposing 511 in their first innings, anchored by 240 by Rachin Ravindra, and South Africa in response were 62 for 3 a short time ago. That's the news.
Pacific Waves.
Bringing Kiribati back into the forum.
Diving into the big stories of the region.
They are an instrument of the Constitution of Fiji.
And shining a light on issues affecting Pacific peoples in Aotearoa and around the world.
Being able to go out into different places and areas that share special connections with our community was really special.
We tala noa to Pacific leaders, newsmakers, experts and commentators, and bring you up-to-date coverage from our dedicated RNZ Pacific team and talented correspondents on the ground in the region. Pacific Waves at 8:15 weeknights on RNZ National.
You're back on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday for all of Te Ika Maui, the North Island, fine apart from areas of cloud, morning and night in the west. Looking at the South Island, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, also Bulla, fine weather, warm in the east. Westland, cloudy periods, rain at times south of the glaciers. Otago and Southland, mostly fine and warm, but rain on Dakiuda, Stewart Island at times. High cloud tomorrow with periods of rain for Southland and Clutha. Fiordland, periods of rain with some heavy falls. And Dekohu, Chatham Islands, fine, but some cloud tomorrow evening. It is coming up to 8 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Kia ora rā e ho. No mai, haere mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Government ministers have been booed, drowned out and heckled at Waitangi today as the coalition came face to face with Māoridom. There were insults and protests, and the Deputy Prime Minister told demonstrators to get an education. Our reporter Jimmy Ellingham is at the treaty grounds and joins us now. Kia ora, Jimmy. Tell us about the disruption to some of the politicians' kōrero.
Kia ora, Lisa. Yes, boos and jeers were aimed at Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters, who was told to noho, or sit down. The crowd also booed and sang waiata when ACT Party leader David Seymour delivered his address, and his MP Nicole McKee was heckled with some pretty strong language as she spoke entirely in te reo Māori. After I asked her how that left her feeling.
Oh, look, I'm fine. And I'm fine because I've come home, and being able to stand up and do the kōrero through a pōwhere, I knew was not going to, make everybody happy. But it wasn't about everyone being happy, it was about having an opportunity. And I was really humbled to be able to be given that opportunity and to get my own truth across, which is about the representation of both Māori and Pākehā living together in the same world with tino rangatiratanga for all.
When you were speaking, some people were shouting out, shame. How do you feel about that?
Well, at the end of the day, everybody deserves the chance to have their say. And if they're saying shame, then that's their feelings. But what I spoke was my truth. And I'm not ashamed of my truth. And I'm not ashamed of my whakapapa. But the fact that we can have a dialogue just means that we are on the pathway to actually being able to come together and unify.
What do you think the result of that dialogue will be? Because lots of Māori have said they feel under attack by the debate going on.
I listened to a lot of the kōrero that happened today, and what I've picked up from Māori is the hurt. And this is the whole point of everyone coming together to have a kōrero so we can listen. I've taken that on board, the hurt that I've heard, and that is also why we need to watch how we go about having the conversation. I'm proud to be a part of this, and I want outcomes that benefit all New Zealanders. So it's about not only just talking, but also listening.
And that's your point of view. What about the leadership of the ACT Party?
The leadership of the ACT Party wants the same thing, where we have tino rangatiratanga for all, where everybody is equal. Being able to get up there as a wahine and express my own truth from my whakapapa, which is not just Māori but Scots as well, that unification, as I said, this is the start. This is how we go about having that conversation. Some people are not happy, some people are happy that we're here, some are not. This is where it all begins, and may we all come to a really good outcome at the end of it all.
Is that possible though? Because there was a remark at the end, wasn't there, about two people speaking different languages almost, which shows the gap between perhaps the two different ways of thinking.
And I think that shows that we have such a modern, multi-ethnic society here in New Zealand. There are more than 2 languages here in this country. What we need to do is be able to respect everybody's views and allow everyone the chance to be able to portray them. And then we can really start listening and working through how we're going to deal with this and what the te tiriti means in modern day, but how we respect our tipuna, what we want to do and move as we go forward. But we have to encompass everybody, because no country in the world has ever survived with the sort of division that we're seeing now. It's about unification, not division.
What about the reception your leader got? He also got quite a tough reception. Was that something you expected?
I'm really proud of him because he continued anyway. I think it's a sign of a leader who can stand up and continue their kōrero even when others are trying to shut them down. I think it's really important, as Ngāpui had kept saying, is to have the conversation, allow people to be heard. Those that shut down others, they're actually shutting their own minds, and it's narrow-minded. We actually need to open it up because there are more than 1 or 2 views on this topic in New Zealand.
Is it worth having that debate, though, given the National Party has been pretty clear that there will not be a treaty principles referendum?
I think it's time to have the debate. New Zealanders put their pen to paper and they voted on being able to have a say. And when you listen to the other kōrero, there's a lot of New Zealanders that are not happy with it. As representatives of those who voted for this government, we need to stand up and represent those people as well. So we have to come out there and have the conversation. Where it ends up, again, that's going to be for the people to decide. It shouldn't be for politicians. Politicians should make the opportunity available, and the people are the ones that should come out with the end result.
Is there a danger, though, that we could see a racially divisive debate?
I hope that we don't. I hope that by opening the door, we can actually have a serious conversation. If it becomes racial, it won't be coming from the ACT Party. ACT actually wants to have that decent conversation so we move forward together as one.
And that is ACT MP and Government Minister Nicole McKee speaking there to Jimmy Ellingham. There's a flood of experts with ideas on how to plug Wellington's water woes, yet the city is still hemorrhaging 40% of drinkable water. Last week, Master Plumbers told Checkpoint its members are qualified and available to help patch leaks in the capital, saying many of the problems are at Toby's or isolation valves and they're on private property. A report shows response and repair times are blown out in the capital. A patch-up that should take less than 5 days to do is taking 40 days on average, and staff shortages at the region's water services are stalling repairs. Now, the Professional Association for Civil Contractors says there are enough of its people to do the work, but there's not enough funding being allocated. Joining us now is Civil Contractors New Zealand Chief Executive Alan Pollard. Kia ora, Alan. It seems to be an age-old problem, not enough money to go around. What's the answer there?
Yeah, cool, Lisa, and thanks for having me on the show. Look, I think it's time to be a little creative in how we fund our infrastructure broadly, not just water. And it was encouraging before the election that the now new government talked about looking at alternative ways to fund, whether that's user pays or whether it's accessing some international funding lines. And we need to now be a lot more creative, because if you look at water, we just don't have the rates base or population base to provide the kind of funding for the investment that's needed.
So for Wellington, what do you think the solution is then? Should we be seeking international investment to solve Wellington's water problems?
Look, I think we should look at all the alternatives. I think really part of the solution, and look, I commend the Master Plumbers for coming up publicly and taking a stand on behalf of the Wellington community, because at the end of the day, it's the health, wealth and well-being of a community that's at stake. But that's not the only part of the solution. It's a much bigger solution. And to us, that means let's actually get all the parties together. Central government who, there can 3 waters, but at this stage, we don't know yet what's replacing it. They've talked a lot about creative funding. Let's bring local government together. They can do an accurate assessment of the work needed and the priority to complete the work. And let's actually get the contractor community together, because we're the experts in design and delivery. We actually do stuff. So how about getting us all together to try and work out a solution that's going to work for Wellington? And I have to say, it's a national problem.
If you do stuff, are you doing stuff to have the conversations with Wellington Council and Wellington Water about this, and the government? Are you having those conversations?
Well, we are certainly having them, and to be fair, the government is listening. But right now,
who are you talking to specifically, Alan?
We talk to the ministers responsible, so infrastructure, local government, RMA reform and so on. I mean, they all have a part to play in this conversation. But, what we're facing as an industry, Lisa, at the moment is that we have a lot of capacity and capability available, but there is no work. Decisions aren't being made largely because funding's not being allocated to address the problem.
So you've got people lying idle, are you saying, in your industry?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have. And that's the frustration of it, because we know there's a major problem, not just in water, but right across the infrastructure space. We've had our businesses gear themselves up based on the conversations that the previous government or this government have had. But nothing's happening. We've got to do stuff. And so we're willing and able to help however way we can to make that happen.
So how long before you start to lose expertise? People go overseas. They can't get work here. They can't do what they're trained to do. They take off. So how long before that starts happening?
Look, it's happening now right across the sector. Other markets are quite attractive, and there's some comprehensive investment programs happening across the Tasman, for example. So we are losing skill and expertise. And if you look at the water space, that's a particularly specialist area where you build up the skills and competency over many, many years. And so the last thing we want to do is lose those. The other thing that happens, of course, is that our businesses need revenue, so they'll look to redeploy their people and equipment elsewhere. And the risk of that is once the sector gets its act together and makes some decisions, who's going to do the work at that stage? It's a really critical point we're at.
I return to my earlier question, which you didn't give me a specific answer to. When you say that all funding options should be explored for Wellington, do you have a position, your organisation, on what you think are realistic ways to fund Wellington's water? And are you giving specific examples to the Minister, for example, Simeon Brown, and saying, why aren't you seeking overseas investment, or we should do it this way? Have you put a proposal to him?
Oh, well, we haven't put a proposal, but we are doing that in our conversations. Our view very clearly is that race-based funding is not working because we don't have the population base. The country, including councils, are heavily indebted, so our ability to borrow money now is highly constrained. The only options we have is to look at alternative methods, and that could be a user pays way of doing it. It works for example, water meters in the water space, or road user charges in the transport space, or it could be national investment, which obviously has a toll or a charge associated with it. The government talked about this pre-election. There's a real opportunity now to come together to actually explore those.
What confidence do you have in Wellington Water and the councils to manage this issue?
Look, we have a lot of sympathy for Wellington Water. We have a great.
Not asking about sympathy though, Alan. I'm asking about your level of confidence.
I think the confidence we lack is more in the council actually providing the funding to make it happen. And some of that comes to the messaging that central government's giving council about where is the water reform going now that Three Waters has been canned. Huge amount of uncertainty. But our conversations are first with government to give some clear direction about what's happening and some clear direction on funding. And second, council with a clear prioritisation of a work program, because that's the only way that our contractors can have confidence to build the capability to do the work.
If you're worried about them with the ability to find the funding, is it time for commissioners?
Look, I don't know if it's time for commissioners or not. I think there's some clear conversations to be had between these parties, and I would like to think that within those constraints, the local government, the central government and the contractors, there's enough capability and resource and competency to actually come up with a solution.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is the Chief Executive of Civil Contractors New Zealand, Alan Pollard there. It is 19 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The UK government says Iran will be held accountable for the actions of armed groups it supports in the Middle East. The US and UK launched fresh rounds of airstrikes on Houthi fighters in Yemen over the weekend, aimed at deterring further attacks on international shipping in the Red Sea. They were supported by 6 allied countries, including New Zealand, as part of an international military coalition. The BBC's Orla Guerin reports.
It's becoming a familiar sight. RAF Typhoon jets taking off last night for a bombing raid on Houthi targets in Yemen. The third round of joint US-UK strikes. Not an escalation, according to the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps. Not a deterrent either, according to the Iranian-backed Houthis, who have been attacking international shipping in the Red Sea since this hijacking in November. They said today they are making a moral stand in support of Palestinians in Gaza. And more fires burning in the Middle East. Here, the aftermath of deadly US bombing raids on Friday in Iraq and Syria in retaliation for the killing of 3 American soldiers. In Baghdad today, a fleet of ambulances carry those killed by the US. 17 fighters from militias backed by Iran. Officially, they are part of Iraq's security forces, but in many ways, they are foot soldiers for Tehran. The US strikes have caused anger here. The government saying they have threatened the security of Iraq and the region. A red line was crossed by targeting our forces, says Falah al-Fayyad, leader of the militias. This must not be repeated. And the chant from the crowd, America is the greatest devil. They want US forces out. These men have come to mourn and to honour their dead, victims of American bombing raids. But there is also a message in all of this. It's a show of strength, a show of unity, and a warning to the United States. We are here, and we're not going anywhere. But the mood was muted, and there were no fiery threats of retaliation. Iran doesn't want an escalation in the tit-for-tat. Neither does Washington. While the war rages in Gaza, one false move could set the region alight.
Indonesia's president is backing his own son to become the country's next vice president. Joko Widodo can't run for election again, but some Indonesian voters hope his son will carry on his legacy. Despite some critics, many are shrugging off concerns about nepotism. Here's the ABC's Bill Birtles.
At rallies across Indonesia, supporters and candidates are dancing. The sight of 72-year-old former military man Prabowo Subianto showing off his moves has become a viral hit for supporters. He's the front-runner for president, but at a rally in central Java, many said they were there for his support act. Yang di belakang, ayo. 36-year-old Gibran Rakabuming Raka looks a bit like father and son standing next to Prabowo. But his dad is actually the current president, Joko Widodo, known as Jokowi, a man who is still hugely popular but will have to stand down due to term limits. I am a supporter of President Jokowi, a farmer attending the rally says, so I will vote for his son Gibran. And Gibran is running to be Prabowo's deputy, so I'll support Prabowo too, he said. It's a common sentiment, particularly in Gibran's hometown Solo, a city of about 500,000 people. He's been the mayor for 2 years, which a court headed by Gibran's uncle deemed enough experience for him to run for vice president, even though he's 4 years shy of the minimum age requirement. Akila Cikalayanto is a university student in Solo and a first-time voter.
To be honest, I was surprised when I first heard that Gibran was running for vice president because he's only been the mayor of Solo for 2 years and he's also quite young. I think it's better for him to finish off his term in Solo first.
But she's pondering voting for him.
As mayor of Solo, Gibran works fast. He gets results, he's very active on social media and he's close to the people.
Her friend Vemas Adair Suputra says he's willing to overlook the nepotism of Gibran's rapid rise because his dad, Jokowi, is a good leader.
I'm not concerned about a new political dynasty because I've seen that Jokowi is really genuinely working for Indonesia, and if Gibran is a bit too young to lead Indonesia, well, he can always learn the skills from his dad.
While President Joko Widodo is assumed to be backing the Prabowo-Gibran pair, he's refrained from publicly declaring it to avoid accusations of meddling. But he's now suggested it is okay for a sitting president to campaign. In a hint, he'll join his son and Prabowo Subianto in the coming days to try to boost their vote above 50%, the number needed to avoid a runoff election later this year.
Facebook is marking its 20th anniversary. It has grown from a network for Harvard University students to one of the largest online platforms in the world. But the site has come under increased pressure from regulators and competition. Facebook helped usher in the era of social media, but also triggered concerns about fake news, the mental health of young users, and the foundations of democracy. The BBC's James Clayton looks back at a turbulent 2 decades.
For me, there are 2 chapters for Facebook over the last 20 years. The first is more than a decade's worth of exponential growth. People signed up in their droves. It was almost impossible to find someone who wasn't on Facebook. And the platform was relatively uncontroversial. But then the next chapter began to develop, a very unwanted chapter for Facebook.
They don't care whether or not what they do is legal as long as it gets the job done.
First came the Cambridge Analytica scandal, which involved the misuse of data to micro-target voters in both the Brexit referendum and the 2016 US presidential election. And then there was the Frances Haugen scandal, the whistleblower who said that Facebook was putting profits over safety, particularly over young women and girls. Only this week, Mark Zuckerberg was asked to apologise to families who said their children had been harmed by social media.
No one should have to go through the things that your families have suffered.
2 years ago, Mark Zuckerberg changed Facebook's name to Meta. Now, officially that was because he wanted it to better reflect his vision of a company that was going to build a metaverse. But unofficially, the brand had become toxic. In making this piece, we wanted to film next to Meta's famous sign.
Sir, you can't be filming?
No recordings?
No recording.
That is what Meta is now. It is a lot more nervous of the media than it used to be. Meta now, of course, is a lot more than just Facebook. It owns WhatsApp, it owns Instagram, and it also has its own VR headset. And that's where Mark Zuckerberg thinks the future lies, in VR. He believes that the world is shifting from a place where people connect online to a world where people want to connect virtually. The problem, though, is that Mark Zuckerberg has already spent tens of billions of dollars building the metaverse, and there's very little evidence to suggest that people really want to spend much time in VR chatting to their friends. The world is kind of appealing. And that's Mark Zuckerberg's major problem. He might think that the vision of the future is the metaverse, but it makes all of its money through social media. And that makes trying to predict what Meta's going to look like in even a year's time or 2 years' time pretty difficult to do.
OK, before we head off, a few of you got in touch about what Paris is doing, tripling the charges for SUVs parking in the city. This listener says double cab utes and SUVs that are not business vehicles should definitely be taxed heavily, and triple parking charges for them. They're too large for the city streets and parking areas. Someone else says, yep, not just for out-of-townies either. Very interesting. Not too keen on the bigger vehicles. The Late News team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. If you missed anything from the program, you can find Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcast from. We will be back on Wednesday, special programming tomorrow for Waitangi Day. If you've got the day off, do enjoy it. Thank you so much for your company. Catch you a little later in the week.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Tēnā tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. The Prime Minister is defending the amount of time he spent speaking about the treaty during his address at Waitangi earlier today, with a number of other speakers drowned out. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says joint airstrikes with the US on Houthi targets in Yemen were carried out in self-defence. The authorities in Chile say wildfires raging in the centre of the country have now killed nearly 100 people. And Taylor Swift has won the Grammy Award for Album of the Year, becoming the only artist to win the top music industry prize for a fourth time. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.